Now, might not remember this, but Trump's first rally of the 2024 campaign was held in Waco, Texas, the site of a deadly standoff between federal agents and a religious cult in 1993. That was not a coincidental choice. And at the beginning of that very same rally, Trump put his hand over his heart as a rendition of the national anthem sung by a choir of imprisoned rioters blared over the speakers. And that kicked off an effort to completely rewrite history that lasted the entire campaign. I mean, Trump started referring to the insurrectionists as political prisoners, as hostages, as patriots of all things. He vowed to pardon them if and when he returned to office. And we were all left to wonder which people he meant exactly when he said that, which he said repeatedly. I mean, did he mean David Dempsey, who prosecutors called political violence personified, who attacked officers with flagpoles, crutches, pepper spray, broken furniture in his own hands and feet? Did he mean Daniel Ball, who hurled an explosive device into a tunnel packed with police officers trying to fend off the mob? Or did he mean Thomas Webster, a retired police officer himself who tackled a member of the Capitol Police, attacked him with a flagpole, and tried to remove his helmet and gas mask? Or maybe he meant Daniel Rodriguez, who drove a stun gun into the neck of Officer Michael Fanone. Donald Trump says those people are political prisoners and hostages and patriots. And when he returns to office in 2 weeks, he may well pardon each and every one of them. And that's just the tip of the whitewashing spear. Trump is also stacking his cabinet with election deniers. One of the architects of the plot to steal the election was just reelected Speaker of the House. Some lawmakers are bringing insurrectionists as their guests to the inauguration. And it's hard to imagine any of that would be happening without Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, the president-elect, embracing the role of the people who attacked the Capitol 4 years ago. Now, with all of that I just outlined, there is a natural inclination to feel pissed off and frustrated that the system failed in some way. And I've done my own reflection on that over the last few years. Believe me, I get it. I look back at the months after January 6th as President Biden was preparing to take office, as we were all working to get Judge Merrick Garland confirmed as Attorney General. Now, this is a man who has an unassailable resume and viewed the job as it should be viewed, through the prism of the law and history. But I do wonder if at that moment in history, he was the right choice for the job. Yes, the Justice Department has charged about 1,500 people for their role that day. But what about the guy who sparked it all? The guy walking around free and hosting events for election deniers at Mar-a-Lago in the weeks before his inauguration. Would a different attorney general have acted sooner? Would that have made any difference? We'll never really know, but I do wonder. I also look back at the strategy of not speaking out about Trump's impeachment from the White House podium, not speaking enough about the impact his rhetoric had on the rise in political violence, and wonder whether that was the right strategy for that moment in history. Yes, it was done with absolutely the right intention, to attempt to bring the country together, to move forward, and to try to work together even with people you disagree with to get things done. But I wonder if it also gave space for people to forget, to get numb to the impact of one man's power, and what could happen if he was given it again. So those are a couple of my own personal reflections. And look, we can't predict the future, just like none of us can change the past. But we do know that history has a tendency to repeat, which is why we have to keep the memory of the worst days alive. It's why we need to reflect and to question the choices that we all made along the way. It's why we need to change our approach when warranted. It's why we need to keep defending the things that matter, even when the politics might be murky. Because it isn't always about politics. It's not. Sometimes it's just about what's right. I mean, today the sitting vice president of the United States certified the election of the man who defeated her, the man she repeatedly called, accurately, a threat to democracy.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes. Kamala D. Harris Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 226 votes.
That must have felt, horrible. But the peaceful transfer of power, even after a hard-fought campaign, is part of what keeps a democracy functioning. It's also what's right. And while we should never forget what happened 4 years ago, and we're going to talk about it tonight a lot, we can all do our part to try and make sure it never happens again. Joining me now is Congressman Jamie Raskin. He led the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, served on the January 6th House Select Committee, and he has continued to keep the memory of January 6th alive, raising all of the important questions. It's great to see you. There's no one I wanted to talk to more than you today. You are just always so thoughtful and reflective in moments when people need to hear it. So I just outlined why I think it's important to remember the events of that day and what it's important to remember about it. But as you've reflected on it, what do you hope people remember?
Well, I hope people remember the valor and the bravery of our officers, like Sergeant Gonell, who I think is going to visit with you, and Harry Dunn, and hundreds of officers who put themselves between the Capitol, the Congress, the Vice President, and a rampaging mob of thousands who had been sent by Donald Trump to try to overturn a presidential election. And those people were really on the front lines. And as long as we remember them and their sacrifice and their injuries and the fact that their lives and their families have been turned upside down, we won't forget that this was a real event. They're not going to be able to shroud it in all kinds of right-wing conspiracy theory and myths. But when I was sitting there today, Jen, I was thinking a lot about the Electoral College. This is an 18th century institution that's very creaky. It's given us 5 popular vote losers in our history twice in this century, George W. Bush and Donald Trump, and that fundamentally altered the trajectory of our politics. It marginalizes the vast majority of the American people. It's very weird. We've gotten conditioned to it, but strange to have a presidential election that comes down immediately to 6 or 7 states, and everybody else is just watching what happens in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. Why don't we have an election for president like an election for representative or senator or mayor or governor? Whoever gets the most votes wins. And you don't have to have a vice president who's in the race, whether that's Kamala Harris or I remember Al Gore was in the same situation or Richard Nixon was in that situation, counting the Electoral College votes. And people don't even understand it anymore. Like our Republican colleagues today, they were cheering and stomping their feet and acting like it was the Republican National Convention. Our job there was just to be counting the votes. But people don't fundamentally understand it. And it's time for a refresh. And I think this is a good opportunity to do it. Donald Trump, he's very proud of the fact that he won the popular vote by 3 million votes, the way that Joe Biden was proud of the fact that he won by 7 million votes 4 years ago. Okay, why don't we all agree just to have a popular vote for election and move away from a dangerous and manipulable Electoral College system?
Hopefully it's not always able to be manipulated, but I think a lot of people share your view on the Electoral College versus the popular vote. Let me ask you about a clip. I just played the clip of the vice president. You referenced this, certifying the election, something others have done in history. Usually just normal par for the course, but feels hard to watch a bit in this moment, given the role Trump played 4 years ago. What was going through your head when you were watching?
Well, it's a bitter pill to swallow. We were there on the floor, the Democrats acting as constitutional patriots. We are demonstrating our fidelity to the constitutional process as it's written. And we did the right thing in that sense. But it was a very bitter pill to swallow, given that 4 years ago, when they faced electoral defeat, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College, by more than 7 million votes in the popular vote, the Republicans under Donald Trump mobilized a violent insurrection to try to effectuate a backroom political coup against the vice president. They were trying to force Mike Pence to unilaterally declare that the Electoral College votes coming from Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and Arizona would be voided out, and either Trump would just be declared the president or they would kick the whole thing into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election under the 12th Amendment, where they knew we would be voting not on the basis of one member, one vote, how we usually vote, but rather one state, one vote. This is all part of the arcane, intricate architecture of the Electoral College that most people haven't studied. And most people think that you go and you just vote and whoever gets the most votes wins. And that's not what's taking place under the Electoral College. And so there are a lot of weaknesses and perils in this process. And I would think now that we've had two popular vote winners, one from each party back to back, we could all agree now is the time to move forward and to pick the president the way we pick everybody else on the basis of whoever gets the most votes.
Sounds very rational, doesn't it? A good discussion to be had. Let me ask you, to the point of, we've been talking a little bit about rewriting history and the importance of fighting back against that. And today, the lawyer for Enrique Tarrio, who's serving 22 years, filed an official request for a pardon. Do you think Trump will pardon him?
Look, the pardons have been used for three kinds of cases, as far as I can tell from reading the decisions on it. One is if a person is actually innocent and new information turns up. Two is if there was some kind of profound procedural miscarriage of justice. Three is if the person was guilty, but they're reformed and rehabilitated. Well, I don't hear anybody saying that the people we see on all these video clips were actually innocent, and nobody has identified any procedural miscarriage of justice. So I think Donald Trump is basically saying, when he wants to pardon all of these people, that they are reformed and they're rehabilitated and they do not constitute a danger to the public safety today. Is that true or is that not true? Well, we should go through each one of these cases. That's why there's a pardon attorney at the Department of Justice. But if Donald Trump doesn't want to wait for the pardon attorney in the Department of Justice to actually go through the cases and make a recommendation, he is placing his personal seal of approval, vouching for each of these people as he pardons them, which means he essentially becomes responsible for whatever happens with them. And have they been reformed? Have they been rehabilitated? Donald Trump should tell America why he thinks that someone who smashes a police officer over the head with a stick or a baseball bat or a Confederate battle flag actually belongs on the streets. Are they no longer a danger to police officers? Are they no longer a danger to federal, state, or local government or law enforcement officials? Who knows? But that's why this is a radically unprecedented and novel situation we're in. He's pardoning people that he sent to the Capitol to go and fight like hell, or we wouldn't have a country anymore. And I understand politically the logic of why he would do it, but legally and morally, I don't understand the logic of it unless he's willing to vouch for each of these people.